Welcome to the Reddit Mic, where we unpack the most compelling stories and really extract those crucial insights you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a Reddit saga that absolutely captivated the internet. It's a narrative so bizarre, so unsettling, it kept people guessing for years. So, our mission today is to really understand the layers here. From the initial shock of that first post through all the escalating, frankly disturbing behaviors to the kind of surprising revelations in the update. We want to see what it tells us about navigating extreme stress, unhealthy family dynamics, especially during a really vulnerable time like pregnancy. Let's unpack this. So, at its core, this story revolves around an expectant mother. It's her first pregnancy, and it takes this incredibly dark, distressing turn, and it's largely because of her husband and his father. The central tragic detail here is that the husband's own mother died in childbirth with him.
Right. You can immediately see how sensitive that is, how deeply traumatic that piece of family history would be for them.
Absolutely. But what's truly unsettling, I think, is how that past trauma seemed to just warp their present reality. The original poster, let's call her OP, she described how her husband and father-in-law, the FEFAL, and he was hugely active part of their lives, living nearby, dinners multiple times a week.
Right. They became, and this is her word, completely convinced she was going to die in childbirth.
Wow.
And even though they wouldn't maybe say it outright, their behavior became intensely stressful, deeply uncomfortable for her.
Just imagine that, this constant, unspoken dread just hanging over everything. And during what should be a joyful time, the OP explicitly stated she had, quote, a completely complication-free pregnancy. And this line really stuck with me. No reason to think I will die screaming.
Yeah, that hits hard. It highlights the total disconnect, doesn't it, between the medical reality and their fixed belief. It wasn't about her health at all.
No.
It was entirely about their projection, their past trauma being forced onto her future.
So this conviction, this certainty that she would die, how did that actually play out day to day? It sounds like it started with things that might seem, well, almost practical on the surface, like life insurance.
Sort of, yeah. But that was just the very tip of a really chilling iceberg. Updating life insurance, drafting a will. Okay, maybe intense, but perhaps understandable given the history. But then the husband asked the OP to, quote, go through all of my possessions and inventory, what I wanted to be saved for the baby versus what I would want to be returned to my family in the event of my death.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. And that's where the OP drew a really firm line. She said, too morbid, no way.
No way indeed. I mean, it's like they were planning her funeral, not the baby's arrival. That must have felt incredibly isolating, your own husband treating you like you're already gone.
Exactly. And it gets even more disturbing. The FAL wasn't just passively agreeing. He actively pressured her. He apparently got on her case about how she was making things difficult for her husband in the event that he will be a grieving widower with a newborn.
That's actually terrifying. The implication that the FAL wanted her to die. Did the OP or, the Reddit commenters speculate on why, what his motivation could possibly be?
Well, the OP herself had this really chilling theory. She felt, and I'm quoting again, he wants me to die. Her reasoning was that his whole life identity for the past 35 years has been amazing single dad. Apparently, he never dated, didn't have close friends, not even really hobbies.
Wow.
She suspected he was looking forward to being able to guide my husband through what he went through, like a desire to relive or reinforce his own narrative, whatever the cost to her.
And it wasn't just about holding possessions, was it? This is where the story, based on details dug up by commenters, gets even darker.
Much darker, yeah. Commenters reported that the husband and FEO were apparently packing up her clothes to donate them in advance of the birth, since she wouldn't need them afterward.
Seriously.
Seriously. And get this. The husband made her record videos to her child so the kid could meet their mom after she died in childbirth.
I have no words for that.
And he even apparently looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, I'm going to miss you so much.
That's, it's not grief or fear, is it? That sounds like premeditation almost.
It really does. It paints this picture of an almost pre-planned, accepted inevitability. Not a genuine fear they were trying to, say, get therapy for or overcome together. And the husband also completely pulled away from the OP. He was essentially acting like her due date was her death date. Every minute with him became, as she put it, morbid, stressful, and a reminder that our marriage seems to be crumbling.
And she told them this was upsetting her, repeatedly.
Repeatedly. But it only made things worse. It got so bad her own therapist gave her some really crucial advice.
Which was?
Basically, that she didn't owe it to her husband to be stressed during labor. That his presence wasn't more important than her safe and healthy delivery.
Thank goodness for that therapist.
Absolutely. And that clarity, that permission, ultimately led the OP to ban both her husband and the FIL from the delivery room.
A huge step, but necessary, clearly.
Hugely necessary. But taking that step also kind of unearthed a deeper layer of control. When the OP confronted her husband about his supposed therapy, because she was, very adamant that I was getting an epidural and ex-Silo had no say about any medical procedures I may take, things escalated.
Wait, hang on. He tried to dictate her medical choices too, like the epidural?
Yes. He had previously told her she was not allowed an epidural or laughing gas.
That's not just preparing for death. That's active control during labor.
Precisely. A massive red flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this whole situation, it culminated in this really tense confrontation. The OP told her husband she was seeking her own therapist because his and his father's actions were, frankly, severely worrying her.
How did he react?
He shouted at her, said she didn't need a therapist, that he was just trying to be prepared.
Prepared. Right, but the actual truth, when it finally surfaced, that was something else entirely.
It really was. When she pushed back, challenged him, he finally caved. It turns out, there was no therapist at all. It was just his dad.
No way.
Yeah. During all those times, he was supposedly at therapy appointments. He was with his dad.
The deception. It's staggering. That shows the depth of the FIL's influence, doesn't it? And the husband's complicity.
Completely. And that was it for the OP. That was the turning point. She gave him a clear choice. He could either go to therapy for real this time, or I was leaving.
And he refused.
He refused. So she packed her things, moved in with her mother, and the harassment from him and his family got so bad she even had to change her phone number.
Just awful. Okay, but then came the update. 2 years later, what happened?
The update confirmed her incredible resilience. She'd had a beautiful and healthy baby girl.
Thank goodness.
And, as she put it, with some dark humor, I imagine, I lived, obviously.
Oh, good for her.
In the end, it was just her mother with her in the delivery room, and she said the nursing staff were an absolute godsend. They made sure neither the ex-husband nor the ex-FL could get anywhere near the room. The divorce was ongoing, but she hoped for a co-parenting agreement. But crucially, she stated very clearly that as long as she lives, her ex-FL will never be near my daughter.
Wow. That outcome must have been such a relief for the Reddit community, too. People were genuinely worried for her safety, weren't they?
Oh, hugely. I mean, given how intense their focus on her death was, many commenters had speculated pretty dark things, wondering if they might actively or, passively try to cause her death.
It's chilling to even think about.
Which then begs the question, right? What was their reaction when she actually survived? Commenters were wondering, would they actually be happy she lived? Or would it, completely throw everything off for them because they'd been so invested, so caught up in planning for her death?
Some even wondered if the husband might actually resent her for not dying.
Exactly. It just speaks to how twisted that whole belief system had become.
One of the most powerful takeaways here, and maybe surprisingly uplifting for you listening, is the role of the L&D nurses. The OP had been really scared the FIL would just bulldoze his way in, get whatever he wants in the delivery room. She even said, "You haven't met this man." But the consensus from actual medical professionals commenting was so clear, wasn't it?
Incredibly clear and emphatic. Things like, hell hath no fury, like an L&D nurse protecting a patient. They were adamant. Nurses don't play. They will absolutely kick someone out and call security immediately. Many said variations of, we've met people like him. They're like a hellhound when it comes to protecting their patient.
It's such a vital point. It highlights that crucial, maybe often unseen role medical staff play in advocating for patients, enforcing boundaries when people are at their most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
But, okay, despite the positive outcome for the OP and her daughter, the story does leave some lingering concerns, doesn't it? Especially about the child.
It does. If the ex-husband gets custody time, how does she ensure the XFL stays away? Especially given his, apparently deeply ingrained trauma and that disturbing desire to replicate his single dad identity.
It's a complex dynamic, this whole generational trauma thing. The FIL's own tragic experience seemed to just profoundly warp his perception, leading to this incredible need for control over his son's life And then, by extension, the OP's life and even death.
It's such a stark reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
How unchecked trauma can become so destructive, how it can ripple outwards, generationally even.
So what does this all really mean for you listening to this? Beyond the sheer shock value of the details, I think the OP's journey from that place of fear to real empowerment, it's remarkable, but it underscores a really vital lesson. The sheer courage it takes to advocate for your own well-being, especially when you're facing overwhelming, emotionally manipulative pressure from people who are supposed to love you. It's about recognizing when love crosses the line into control and when preparation becomes, well, a morbid obsession.
And it's also such a potent case study on trusting your gut instincts, isn't it? Setting those clear boundaries. And, crucially, seeking external professional support, like therapy. That therapist was a lifeline for her.
Definitely. That was, wow. A truly harrowing, but ultimately, yes, uplifting deep dive into a very specific, very toxic relationship dynamic. It just reminds us how deeply our past experiences, especially the traumatic ones, can color our present and shape our expectations. For better, or as in this case, much, much worse.
And it really underscores the necessity of actually addressing those traumas, head on, rather than letting them fester and dictate our lives or, well, as we saw here, project onto other people in incredibly damaging ways.
So for you listening, what really stands out most about this story? Is it the mother's incredible strength against that psychological manipulation, the just chilling nature of the family's morbid plans, or maybe that unexpected critical role of the hospital staff? We hope this deep dive encourages you to maybe reflect on some of the unseen influences in your own life and the absolute importance of healthy boundaries and self-preservation.
And maybe just one final thought to mull over. If the ex-husband was so utterly convinced his wife was going to die in childbirth, why didn't he consider maybe not getting pregnant in the first place? Rather than just, planning for her demise. It certainly raises an important question about motivations beyond just fear, doesn't it?
All right, moving on to the next story. It's about a family holiday visit that just took this really wild, unexpected turn, and it revealed a very complex and, well, pretty troubling relationship dynamic. So imagine this. You're excited to reconnect with family, full of holiday cheer, and then bam, you're met with this inexplicable coldness. Just makes no sense. And from that one weird moment, this whole chain of events just unravels, exposing some incredibly deep-seated issues that were lurking beneath the surface. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and as we do, you should really pay close attention because this story, it isn't just, family drama. It's almost like a masterclass in spotting those subtle signs of manipulation, recognizing unresolved conflict, and really understanding what pushes relationships to their breaking points.
Yeah.
Even in families that seem, super tight-knit on the outside.
Okay, so our story centers on the original poster, OOP, we'll call her. She's a 19-year-old college student. She arrives for the holidays, and she's really excited to finally get to know her sister-in-law, the SIL. SIL is 26, pregnant, and OOP hasn't seen her much since the wedding, about a year before. So OP flies in, cross-country trip. Her parents and sister aren't home yet, so it's just her and the SIL. Perfect chance to connect, right? She says hi, goes in for a hug, and the SIL actually backs away.
Whoa.
Yeah. OP apologizes, feeling awkward, and the SIL just gives her this weird look. No apology back, nothing.
Okay, right there. That's fascinating, isn't it? That immediate, very selective hostility. When someone's coldness is laser focused on just one person, that's usually not just shyness. It's often a calculated move. Maybe asserting control, maybe just making you uncomfortable.
And the pattern just gets clearer, doesn't it? It keeps going. OP tries to make small talk, asks when the SIL is due. And SIL gives her another one of those weird looks. OOP said it was like I'd asked what her cup size was, just super curtly says, March. Right. And OOP's sister had mentioned that the SIL had PTSD from a previous pregnancy. So OOP immediately starts worrying, thinking, oh no, did I trigger something? Was that the wrong question?
Understandable concern.
Totally. So then she tries a different angle, asks about SIL's work, and the SIL puts her knife down, really loudly on the plate, stares at OOP for maybe 30 seconds straight, silent, then just says fine and walks away.
Okay, that's not just awkward. That's borderline aggressive.
It's bizarre.
That kind of behavior, actively shutting down conversation, creating tension, it really suggests a deliberate attempt to dominate the situation or make OOP uncomfortable. It's not just poor social skills, it feels calculated.
And then comes this really jarring contrast. OOP's parents and sister finally get home, and suddenly SIL is super cheery and nice to them, like a switch flipped, chattering about baby names, flattering the parents, just, laying it on thick. But then when OOP's name which is a family name, by the way, gets suggested for the baby. SIL shoots OOP a death glare.
See? Selective again. Warmth for some, hostility for OB.
Exactly. And it continued at dinner. Total silent treatment towards OOP. OOP asks her to pass the potatoes. Ignored. Asks again. Ignored. It's only when OOP's sister prompts the SIL, like, hey, can you pass the potatoes?
Yeah.
SIL giggles and goes, oh, guess I didn't hear.
Ugh, the fake ignorance. It's such a classic passive-aggressive move. It's not just bad manners. It's about making a point, asserting dominance subtly. And the shift, depending on who's in the room, that's a huge red flag for someone acting with a specific, maybe manipulative agenda.
It definitely escalated from there. The next morning, at breakfast, Azile finally speaks to OP directly again, but the tone is just dripping with snark. She asks if OOP is seeing anyone. OOP says no, busy with school. And Cyril retorts, well, not everyone finds someone.
Ouch. It's just mean.
Right. So unnecessary. But then, just like the day before, immediately switches back to being so nice to the parents, gushing about their gorgeous winter home, how grateful she was they let her vacation there.
It really sounds like a textbook example of a transactional relationship, doesn't it? The pleasantness seems directly tied to who she perceives as beneficial, maybe the ones with money or status. The performance changes based on the audience.
Totally. And then later, OOP and SIL are alone again. SI asks about college. OOP starts talking about her major. She's pre-dental. And the SIL just rolls her eyes and tells OOP she has a problem with reading the room. Then walks away. Again.
Reading the room. Wow. That's projection, maybe.
It feels like it, like you're just trying to have a normal conversation, and that's the response you get. So this whole escalating, bizarre dynamic, it finally comes to a head around the baby's gender reveal. OOP finds out the baby's gender from her mom. Turns out SIL had intentionally kept it from her, even though OOP's sister had specifically asked SIL to share the news with OOP earlier. When confronted, SIL apparently had zero excuse and just gave this deer-in-the-headlights reaction.
Okay, so the withholding wasn't an accident. It was deliberate.
Completely deliberate. Then that omission, that was the final straw for OOP at that moment. She just broke down crying, said she felt spoiled and horrible for being upset, and she actually apologized to them.
Oh, poor OP. She's blaming herself for Excel's bad behavior. But let's pause on that. Why would withholding the gender, which seems, fixable, cause such a breakdown? And why would SIL actively withhold it? It really does seem less about the information itself and more about power, control, maybe making OP feel excluded or less important.
And that's exactly what started to unravel, the why behind it all. OP's mom pulls her aside later and reveals that, the SIL does not like me, flat out. And that SIL was still pissed about the wedding date thing, which was making her behavior even worse now.
A wedding date?
Yes.
From over a year ago?
Yes. And get this, the mom also shared that OP's sister knew SIL had issues with OP. And the sister had apparently given SIL directions to try and get along with me, like coached her.
Wow. So the sister was aware of the animosity.
Seems like it. Okay, so this wedding day backstory. OOP clarified this later. The original wedding date landed right on the day of OOP's college finals, like critical exams. So OOP called her sister, explained she physically couldn't be there unless the date moved. They had a kind of big fight about it. But the sister, who OOP describes as a human golden retriever, basically someone who wants everyone to be happy, eventually moved the wedding back by one day. This was before invitations even went out, mind you.
A one-day shift before invites.
Yeah. And apparently the sister had even joked at the time, it's just a test, maybe trying to lighten the mood after the fight. But Tessiel apparently took that joke, or the whole situation, incredibly personally, and held on to this deep resentment for years.
Okay, that feels disproportionate, doesn't it? When a small adjustment resolved ages ago is still fueling such intense negativity, it's almost never really about the original event, is it? It sounds more like a symptom of deeper issues. Resentment, maybe a need for control that got challenged. The wedding date just became the excuse.
It really seems that way. So things kind of simmered down briefly after the mom's revelation. The next evening, the SIL actually came to OOP and apologized. Sort of. She admitted she'd been petty and rude, claimed the wedding date thing was a non-issue.
Non-issue she was just told OP knew about. Okay.
Right. So OOP, trying to smooth things over, tells SIL, look, I just want to be a good sister-in-law, a good aunt to the baby, trying to connect. But the backlash was immediate and just brutal. SIL lashed out, saying OOP had ruined the opportunity for the first one being a good SIL, and she wasn't banking on the second one being a good aunt.
Wow. Wow. That apology wasn't genuine at all, was it?
Not even close.
That's a really common manipulative tactic, actually.
Yeah.
The non-apology apology. It's designed to make you lower your guard, maybe feel guilty, just so they can strike again, even harder. It's like she was testing OOP's boundaries with that apology, setting her up for that cutting remark. Not seeking forgiveness, setting a trap.
It definitely felt like a trap, and things just blew up from there. It turned into this huge, loud fight between the sister and the SIL. OOP overheard parts of it. At one point, she heard SIL shouting, "Who would you jump in front of a train for, me or her?" talking about OOP.
Oh my God, that's intense. That's emotional blackmail.
And the sister, without even pausing, apparently responded, "My sister, no questions asked." Which then led SIL to scream, "I'd let all my siblings die for you."
Whoa, okay, that is a lot. That's extreme.
The sheer intensity, right. So the next morning, OOP's sister sits down with her, and she reveals that SIL does this to all my sister's friends. This kind of behavior isn't new. Apparently, she and SIL have been fighting often about SIL trying to isolate her, but the sister said SIL's treatment of OOP, her actual sister, was different. That was a deal breaker. She told OOP they were going to try counseling, but if things didn't drastically improve, they would separate after the baby was born, likely heading for divorce.
That's a huge turning point. So the sister recognized the pattern. She'd maybe tolerated it or tried to manage it when it was directed at friends. But the attack on her own sister, her primary family bond, that crossed the line. It really highlights where the sister's ultimate loyalty lies. That became the non-negotiable boundary.
Absolutely. Now, predictably, the Reddit community went wild over this. They had so much to say, and tons of commenters immediately flagged SIL's behavior as classic jealous abuser behavior, pointing out the pattern of trying to isolate her partner, the sister, from her support system, friends, and especially family.
It makes sense. That isolation tactic is very common in controlling relationships.
And people really honed in on the selective kindness, especially towards the parents. The theory was strong that it was financially motivated. The parents apparently bankrolled the sister and SIL's lifestyle vacations, financial help. So some commenters were suggesting SIL saw OOP as like a direct competitor for the rich in-law's money.
That fits the transactional pattern we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And that train comment, and especially the "I'd let all my siblings die for you" follow-up, Reddit labeled that classic abuser speak, called it a villain-level obsession, a massive guilt trip, maybe even a form of love bombing.
Right, love bombing, that overwhelming, exaggerated display of affection or devotion. It's not genuine love, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's meant to manipulate, to test loyalty, make the other person feel indebted or guilty. Saying something that extreme, like "I'd let my siblings die for you," costs nothing. It's a hypothetical grand gesture, but it puts immense pressure on the partner and tries to reinforce that idea of us against the world, isolating them further.
Yeah, it really seemed like while SIL had shown these tendencies before, what happened with OOP was the thing that finally served as the final straw for the sister. It forced her to really confront the reality of the relationship she was in. Some people even speculated that SI might have intentionally waited until she was pregnant to really take off the mask, maybe thinking her wife felt trapped now.
That's a chilling thought, but it does track with controlling behaviors escalating when the perceived escape route for the partner seems narrower. It also makes you look again at the parents' role, doesn't it? They apparently knew that SI hated OOP, but didn't really intervene effectively, even leaving them alone together, kind of hoping it would just smooth out.
Yeah, hoping for the best, I guess.
But while they were maybe preoccupied with the couples fighting later on, OOP was the one internalizing the blame and the stress to the point of vomiting. It really shows how even well-meaning family members can sometimes be out of their depth in these situations. And by not addressing it directly early on, they might inadvertently enable the dynamic, hoping it resolves itself when it clearly needed more direct intervention.
Absolutely. So you go from what looks like a minor family squabble, some holiday awkwardness, all the way to the potential unraveling of a marriage. This whole deep dive really shows how those subtle actions, those weird looks, the passive aggression, how they can reveal these deeply manipulative patterns, and how one person, OOP, refusing to just be isolated and pushed away, actually ended up exposing the truth.
Exactly. And if you look at the bigger picture here, it really underscores a few key things. First, the importance of recognizing consistent patterns of behavior, not just writing off isolated incidents. Second, understanding the real cost of that kind of manipulative loyalty SIL was demanding. And third, just the immense courage it takes to identify and start breaking free from relationships that demand that kind of harmful exclusivity, cutting you off from genuine connection.
So it leaves you with this thought, doesn't it? When someone demands you choose between them and your loved ones, your family, your friends, What does that demand truly reveal about their capacity for real love versus control? And what does it reveal about where your own boundaries need to be? And thinking longer term, what does all this mean for the future of the children who get caught in the middle of these complex, sometimes toxic family dynamics? All right, moving on to the next story. We're unpacking a pretty intense real-life story shared online. We've got a whole stack of sources, all centered around this Reddit post that kicks off with, well, a very surprising and, frankly, terrifying new pet.
Yeah, Burmese python.
Yeah.
Just dropped into the household.
Exactly. So we've got the original plea for help, then several updates that actually span nearly a decade.
And loads of reactions, comments, extra details from the community that really flesh it out.
Think of this as our journey through, well, the unexpected twists of a marriage put to the test by a giant snake and how life just kind of unfolds over years.
It's quite a ride.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It starts back in May 2015. The original post is from this 24-year-old woman.
Right.
She's really distressed because her husband, who's 26, just suddenly brought home a baby Burmese python.
And this was what, just a couple months after their smaller snake died?
Yeah, just 2 months after their corn snake passed.
Yeah.
So the timing is interesting.
And the key thing here, jumping out from the sources, is this wasn't something they decided together at all.
Not even close. He just did it. Apparently, it was some lifelong dream he had.
Okay, but the immediate issue wasn't just him going solo on this huge decision. It was the snake itself, right? For her.
Exactly. She mentions she has generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and this huge snake, understandably, sent it into overdrive.
I can only imagine. Did she know much about them before?
Well, she did her research after it arrived, and she found all these horror stories, Burmese pythons killing pets, kids, even owners sometimes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would terrify anyone, GAD or not.
Totally. And this fear just stuck with her. She says it messed with her sleep for 4 solid months.
4 months. And wasn't there a cat involved too?
Yes, they had a cat. And the python, even as a baby, was already, 6 feet long?
6 feet already.
Yeah. So she was constantly terrified it would somehow get out of its tank and, well...
Eat the cat. Oh my God.
So she started locking the cat in the bedroom with her at night, which obviously disrupted sleep for everyone. Just a constant state of anxiety.
That sounds absolutely awful, like living on edge constantly.
And it wasn't just the fear, there was the practical side. These snakes need a lot of care. Feeding, cleaning the tank, the substrate.
Which probably wasn't pleasant.
No. And even though she hated doing it, she says the duties often fell to her, especially as the snake got bigger. And the food, it escalated. Rabbits. And the source specifically says piglets.
Wait, piglets, seriously?
Piglets, yeah. That gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. This isn't like feeding a corn snake.
No kidding. That's intense and expensive, I imagine. But beyond just the yuck factor and the work, she had longer-term worries too, right? About the snake itself.
She did. It was growing fast, already on its 3rd tank. And they just didn't have the space for what an adult Burmese needs, which is, enormous.
Yeah, people in the comments were talking about enclosures 9 feet long, 4 feet wide?
Exactly. Huge. Basically room-sized.
Yeah.
And then the cost of the food those rabbits and piglets was eating into their savings.
Which is tough. But you have to feed the animal properly.
Right. And then the biggest thing, looking ahead. She wanted kids, but she couldn't imagine having a baby or toddler with a massive python in the house.
Which can live for 20 years.
Or more. So this wasn't a short-term problem. It directly conflicted with her life plans, her dream of being a mother.
So she tried to talk to him about all this, the fear, the cat, the work, the future.
She did. Laid it all out. Her mental state, the practicalities, everything.
And how did he react, based on the sources?
Not well. Basically, totally dismissive. Told her to get over it.
Seriously, get over it.
Yeah. Accused her of not caring about his happiness, of being prejudiced against animals that weren't, cute.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not a great response. Did he offer any, solutions? Or just dismissals?
Mostly dismissals. She shared some specifics. Like he'd say, I won't let it get out, even though there are smaller snakes had escaped before.
Oh, great. So a proven track record there?
Right. Or he'd guilt trip her, like, are you saying you wanted to starve? And when she brought up space, money, kids, he just called it all ridiculous. Said they'd figure it out, find money, everything will be fine.
So basically denial and deflection. It sounds like a massive breakdown. He makes this huge unilateral decision. She's terrified and burdened, and he just refuses to engage with her reality.
That's pretty much the picture painted in that first post. Fear, burden, Financial strain, future conflicts, zero communication. Not a good place for a marriage to be.
Definitely not. Okay, so she posts this asking for advice. What happens next? There's an update pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, just a week later, still May 2015, and things move fast.
This is where the community advice actually led to action.
It seems so. Based on suggestions, she reached out to a friend of her husband's, someone described as a really experienced reptile keeper. Breeds venomous cobras, apparently.
Cobras. Okay, so this guy knows his stuff.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
And reportedly, this friend was shocked when he actually saw the situation.
What did he see?
Well, the source mentions he saw issues like potential overfeeding, the husband wanting to use live food, which is a whole other level.
And the snake was sometimes just out.
Yeah. The source says the 6-foot python was sometimes allowed to free roam in the house, and the husband was handling it alone.
Free roaming. A 6-foot python, that's beyond irresponsible. That's terrifying.
Absolutely. So the friend, seeing all this, apparently gave the husband a really stern talking to. Basically said, this snake cannot stay here. You are not equipped for this.
Good for the friend for stepping up. What was the wife doing while this was happening?
She took matters into her own hands. While her husband was at work Friday morning, she packed up her stuff, grabbed the cat, and moved out to her mom's place.
Wow. Bold move.
Yeah. She called him later, told him she'd left and wasn't coming back until the snake was gone. She figured he'd try to talk her out of it if she told him beforehand.
Smart. Prioritizing her safety and sanity. So how did the husband react to, well, both the friend's intervention and his wife leaving?
It seems like it hitting. She describes him coming over to her mom's looking like a kicked puppy. He apparently broke down, apologized, admitted he'd been careless and selfish.
Did he get why, though? Or was it just about losing the snake?
The source notes that in that moment, his immediate sorrow seemed more about losing the snake. But she also said hearing him actually apologize felt cathartic for her even so.
Right. Okay, so the snake had to go. Where did it end up?
Bucatini, right. That's the name the commenters gave it.
Yeah, Bucatini. The cobra breeding friend helped out. He connected them with someone from a herpetology society who runs a ranch and specializes in rehabilitating big snakes.
Oh, that's good. So Bucatini went to a place with proper space and care.
Exactly. A much better situation for the snake.
Okay, so snake gone, wife maybe feeling a bit hurt, even if belatedly. Did they talk more after that?
They did. Talked a lot, according to the update. He doubled down on the childhood dream thing, saying the desire made him careless and selfish, but insisting he didn't mean to be malicious. But then something else came out, didn't it? Something about how he got the snake.
Oh, yeah. This was big. She learned he had flat out lied about getting it. He'd arranged it all online with a breeder in another state.
While telling her he wanted something else.
Yes, telling her he was looking into getting a milk snake, something much smaller and manageable. Instead, he met this breeder, got the python, and brought it across state lines.
Which, isn't that illegal?
Apparently so. The source mentions the Lacey Act, which deals with trafficking wildlife across state lines. So, yeah, potential illegality on top of the lying.
Wow. That adds a whole other dimension of deceit.
Yeah.
How did she react to finding that out?
Deeply hurt, angry, understandably. It wasn't just the snake, it was the months of being dismissed, the lies, and the fact that it took his friend stepping in for him to actually listen to her.
Right. It wasn't her pain that changed his mind. It was his friend calling him out.
Exactly. He also mentioned something about a quarter-life crisis, feeling inadequate at 26, not having gone to college.
Which, okay, maybe relatable on some level, but like she said, doesn't really excuse how he treated her.
No. She sympathized, but it didn't excuse the behavior. So even with Bucatini gone and the cat safe, she said their marriage was in severe jeopardy. The trust was shattered.
So counseling was the next step.
Yep. They planned to get counseling.
Okay, let's jump ahead slightly. About a month later, June 2015, there's another update. How are things going with therapy?
Well, on the surface, she said it seemed positive. He was making an effort, being contrite, open, trying to do what the therapist suggested.
But, I sense a but.
A big but. She realized something fundamental had shifted for her. She'd lost respect for him, specifically for his intelligence after the whole Python fiasco.
Oof. That's a tough one to come back from. Respect is huge.
Huge. And she said it basically killed her physical attraction to him. Intimacy had just plummeted. She even gave numbers from like 4 or 5 times a week before down to barely at all.
That's a massive change. And did anything else contribute to this feeling?
Yeah, she noticed she was still doing all these little things for him, balancing the checkbook, packing his lunch, things she used to do out of love.
But now felt different.
Totally different. Now it felt like she was being his mother, or like she put it, a naggy sitcom wife. And she was just sick of it. It felt like she was carrying the whole mental load.
That concept, yeah. All the invisible work of running a life. And he didn't pick up on this shift.
He sensed something was wrong, apparently. But according to her, he got irritated. Felt like she wasn't forgiving him, despite him objectively doing all the right things in therapy. He didn't seem to grasp the deeper issue.
Which probably just confirmed her feelings, right? That he didn't really get it.
Exactly. It solidified it for her. And she came to this really painful conclusion. She loved him, yeah, like a friend. They'd known each other since they were kids, but not as a husband anymore.
Wow, that's heartbreaking, especially so soon after getting married.
Devastating for her. She felt like a failure. And she mentioned her friends, her mom, were all telling her to stick it out. You made vows.
But she felt something fundamental had broken.
Yeah. She said she had seen something about him she couldn't unsee, couldn't go back. But at the time of that update, she hadn't actually said the words, "I want a divorce," in therapy yet.
Because saying it makes it real.
Pretty much. She knew it would likely be the end.
Okay, so that's June 2015. Now we take a massive leap forward in time. Over 9 years later, to October 2024, a new update appears.
Totally out of the blue. Amazing, really. A friend sent her a link because her old story was featured in one of those best of Reddit updates things.
9 years. So much can happen. What did she say? Did she confirm the story?
Yep. Confirmed it was her, gave a quick recap. Surprise Python, the fear, him being dismissive, snake rehomed, trust gone because of the lies, feeling like his mom, hating it. All the key points.
And the outcome of the marriage.
Confirmed they separated about 3 months after that last update in 2015. Divorce finalized later.
Okay. But the story doesn't end there, does it? There's another major unexpected twist.
A really tough one. About 6 months after they separated, her grandmother passed away. After the funeral, they ended up having comfort sex.
Oh, okay.
And it turns out her IUD had slipped at some point previously.
Yeah.
She got pregnant.
Wow. Okay. So pregnant by her recent ex-husband right after separating. What did they decide?
It was complicated. They were both unsure, given everything. But she'd always wanted to be a mother, didn't want to terminate, so they decided to actually try again, get back together.
Try to make it work for the baby.
Yeah. But then, just devastating news. Early in the pregnancy, she was diagnosed with a molar pregnancy.
Which is...
It's basically when a tumor develops in the uterus instead of a viable fetus. Awful.
Oh my God. That's heartbreaking.
And it got worse.
Yeah.
After they removed the molar pregnancy, she developed complications, stage 2 cancer.
Cancer from the molar pregnancy.
Yeah, it's a known, though rare complication called choriocarcinoma. She had to go through chemo. Thankfully, she's been cancer-free since 2016.
What an incredibly difficult, traumatic thing to endure. Just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And tragically, according to her update, her ex-husband's behavior while she was going through chemo, being severely ill. That was the absolute final straw.
What did he do?
Or not do.
She puts it very bluntly. He wouldn't or couldn't pick up the slack around the house. She realized she couldn't rely on him, not even when I had cancer.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. At her absolute lowest point, he still couldn't step up.
Seems that way. So literally a week after she got the all clear, declared cancer-free, she told him she was moving out for good and wanted a divorce. No turning back this time.
Understandable. So what happened for her after that? After the divorce, the cancer, how did she rebuild?
Sounds like an amazing story of resilience. She lived with her mom for about a year to recover and regroup.
Smart move.
Then moved to a completely new city for a fresh start. And she went back to school in 2017, did an accelerated nursing program, got her BSN in 2019.
That's fantastic. A whole new career path.
And one she loves, she works as a neonatal nurse now, says it's tough but fulfilling, like she's found her calling. That's wonderful to hear after everything she went through. Did she find personal happiness too?
She did. She met a guy in her nursing program. They were friends first for a couple of years, started dating in 2019, and got married in 2022.
Oh, brilliant.
And she describes him glowingly. An amazing man and partner. Someone she can actually lean on, who doesn't need his socks picked up, and apparently does most of the cooking.
What a contrast. That sounds like a truly supportive, equal partnership.
It really does. And they're planning for the future. Because the chemo caused premature ovarian failure, she'd frozen eggs beforehand.
Oh, that's foresight.
Yeah. So they're planning to start IVF soon. But they're also looking into adoption and foster care. She feels totally confident her new husband will be a great dad.
That's just such a positive turn, a really happy outcome for her. Does she mention her ex-husband at all in this update? What happened to him?
She does, briefly. She heard through her mom, who's still friendly with his mom. Apparently about a month after she left for good, he attempted suicide.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
Really sad. He was hospitalized, and thankfully, he took the advice he received seriously. He followed up with a psychiatrist.
And did that lead anywhere?
It did. He was diagnosed with ADHD and later also with autism.
Ah, okay. Does she comment on that?
Yeah, she notes that the diagnoses explained a lot about his behavior when they were together. That impulsivity, maybe fixation, executive function issues.
It provides context, maybe?
Exactly. Context. Not an excuse, but context.
Oh.
She says he's now on medication, which helps the ADHD. He went to trade school, got a better job, and is in a steady relationship himself.
So hopefully he's doing better too.
Seems like it. She said she doesn't talk to him. It's too painful for both, but she wishes him well and firmly believes they're both better off apart.
Makes sense. How does she feel looking back at her younger self?
She kind of shakes her head, she says, at what she put up with back then, realizes she still had growing up to do herself at 24. She feels some sadness for him, knowing he was struggling undiagnosed.
But she doesn't regret leaving.
Not at all. She stands by her decision, says she had to leave for her own well-being. She was just at her breaking point.
Completely understandable. Oh, and one last detail. What about Bucatini, the snake?
Yes, the update mentions Bucatini is still alive and well, thriving in his ranch home, and she still occasionally talks to the cobra breeding friend who helped facilitate the rehoming.
That's amazing. Bucatini outlasted the marriage by a long shot.
Seems so. A small, strained point of continuity.
Okay, so pulling back from the details, this whole saga, starting with a surprise snake, really hits on some big themes, doesn't it? If we're trying to distill the key takeaways from all these sources, what really stands out?
Well, the first one is blindingly obvious, maybe, but crucial. Major life decisions, especially bringing a living creature into your home, need communication and consent. Full stop.
Especially an animal like a Burmese python. It's not like getting a goldfish.
Exactly. The sources make it clear owning these requires expertise, massive enclosures, safety protocols like needing 2 people for handling, financial stability for, well, piglets. It's a massive commitment, not an impulse buy. That unilateral decision was the initial crack in the foundation.
Absolutely. And flowing from that, the whole issue of respect and communication breakdown.
Right. Takeaway number 2. Trust is fragile. Once it's broken by serious lies, by consistently dismissing your partner's real fears and needs, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. Her respect for him eroded, and therapy couldn't fix that fundamental shift in how she saw him.
Yeah, that loss of respect seemed like the point of no return for her, even before the cancer. And related to that, the dynamic where she felt like his mom.
That's a huge theme. Insight 3. Unequal partnerships, where one person carries the mental load and feels like they're parenting their partner, sometimes called weaponized incompetence, breed resentment and burnout. Her exhaustion with managing his life on top of everything else highlighted their basic incompatibility as partners.
And then there's the later diagnosis of ADHD and autism for the ex-husband. That adds complexity, but the comments and her reflection seem to draw a line, right?
Yes, definitely. Insight 4. There's a difference between a reason and an excuse. While diagnoses like ADHD or autism can explain certain behaviors, impulsivity, difficulty with executive function, intense focus on interests, they don't excuse harmful actions like lying, manipulation, or failing to support a partner in crisis. Responsibility and effort are still key. Many commenters with similar diagnoses emphasize that.
That's a really important distinction. It's about acknowledging challenges while still expecting accountability in a relationship. And finally, just her whole journey.
It's incredibly powerful. Takeaway 5 is really about resilience. Her story is just this incredible testament to surviving immense adversity, the bad marriage, the divorce, the trauma of the molar pregnancy and cancer, and then actively rebuilding a life. Finding a fulfilling career, a loving, equal partnership, and hope for the future. It shows that even devastating problems can become chapters in a much longer, ultimately happier story.
It really is inspiring. From fearing a snake in her apartment to finding her calling as a neonatal nurse and planning a family with a supportive partner, what a transformation.
And even the small details, like Bucatini thriving or the mention of the Lacey Act,
Yeah.
they just add these layers of, well, reality to the whole thing.
Yeah, it grounds it. It's not just a story. It's someone's complex life unfolding over a decade.
Exactly.
So we've really taken a deep dive here. From that initial shock of a surprise python to a story of divorce, illness, resilience, and finding happiness on the other side.
Yeah, we've seen how this one specific kind of niche conflict about a snake actually finds a light on really universal things. Relationships, how we treat each other, responsibility, personal growth.
We've definitely considered the complex mix of individual struggles, how relationships work or don't work, and just the sheer power of bouncing back. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive. In our own lives, how do we navigate that tricky line? When are a partner's struggles things we can work through together, with support, effort, maybe therapy? And when do they represent fundamental incompatibilities or a pattern of disrespect? That means choosing our own well-being has to come first.
That's a tough question. No easy answers there.
Definitely something to think about. All right, moving on to the next story. It's a story that just perfectly captures the intricate dynamics of family, class, and, well, the true meaning of gift giving. Our mission here is to unpack one wife's absolutely devastated Christmas experience, her husband's reaction, and his family's incredibly pointed comments. We're going to pull apart the layers of intention, perception, unspoken expectations, and I promise you, what we uncover about the gift itself might truly surprise you.
Yeah, this deep dive offers a really compelling look at how different upbringings can profoundly shape our entire worldview, impacting even something as seemingly simple as how a Christmas present is given and received.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core conflict here really stems from a significant difference in upbringing between the original poster, the wife we're focusing on, and her husband.
Right.
She explicitly states she comes from poverty. For her, Christmas was this truly monumental event, saved for year-round, and she received like one thing to wear, one book, and one fun item.
Wow.
Yet she describes it as a very rich childhood in all the ways except financially. That line alone just speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. It speaks to a deep appreciation for the effort, the scarcity, and the love behind each gift. Her perspective is rooted in this sort of intangible wealth, emphasizing profound appreciation for even really modest gestures.
Right. Now, contrast that with her husband's background. His family reportedly grossed $300,000 a year, which the source notes was likely back in the 90s, when that was considered a truly high income, a level some commenters described as, richy rich, highlighting the vast difference.
Definitely a different world.
For his family, Christmas was a massive show-off, with each kid easily getting $2,000 or more in gifts.
The contrast couldn't be starker. For his family, Christmas seems to have been less about thoughtful giving and maybe more about a conspicuous display of wealth, almost a competitive event, as some observers noted.
Yeah.
This fundamental difference just sets the stage for how gifts are perceived and valued.
Absolutely. So this couple, married for a couple of years, has clawed their way up. Now, while her husband wasn't apparently given adult financial handouts, he always had a significant safety net his family to fall back on.
Right, that's key.
Which, as we'll see, gives a very different mentality. This past Christmas was their first time they could truly spend decent money on gifts. And her husband, for years, had wanted a guitar. He'd never played, but expressed interest, and they simply couldn't afford it before.
Okay, so this is where her immense effort comes in. The wife did extensive research, aiming to go big or go home within their shared budget. The original plan was $500.
Yeah.
But she ended up spending about $900 CAD, plus another $200 for accessories. So like $1,100 total.
Which is a lot.
It's a lot. And for her, having come from poverty, spending that amount was unfathomable. The emotional weight she invested in this gift is truly palpable when you read her account.
Oh, completely. She was beyond excited, picturing his face lighting up. So Christmas morning arrives, his family is there, and gifts are opened in front of everyone.
Uh-oh. The public opening.
Yes. The wife is basically giddy with excitement. She brings out the guitar case. He opens it, revealing this beautiful Guild F250E, a blonde jumbo. And then his initial reaction, "Oh, thanks, babe. Never heard of this brand."
Oof. Okay, that's the first sort of revel of disappointment, right? Not the overwhelming joy she'd hoped for.
At all.
But it unfortunately gets worse.
Oh, it certainly does. His brother, who apparently owns a Les Paul, a well-known type of electric guitar, often associated with rock music, chimes in with, it's nice, a decent cheapy one to start out with.
Oh, come on. Cheapy.
Right. And then his dad, who apparently played in his 20s, adds, Guild is known for its lower-end models and offers to chip in for a nice one next year if he sticks with it.
Wow. That's just incredibly insensitive and dismissive.
Totally. The wife felt a profound punch to the gut, like she was 9 years old again, instantly transported back to those childhood financial disparities. She strongly felt these comments affected her husband's view, noting he hadn't touched the guitar since.
I can only imagine how crushing that must have felt. Like all that effort, that research just completely invalidated in front of everyone.
It's just awful. She was initially confused because she didn't think her husband had a specific brand in mind, and her own dad confirmed that Guild is a common enough brand. She had carefully chosen it with a music shop expert who reassured her of its quality and longevity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and where their expert opinions completely fall flat.
Right. Tell us.
The Guild F250E is absolutely not a cheap, lower-end model, not by a long shot. In fact, Guild has this incredibly interesting history of ownership. They were once owned by Fender, now Yamaha.
Oh, okay.
And they make very good guitars across a wide price range. For context, some Guild models, like the F55E, retail at around $4,600 USD.
$4,000.
Yeah. So this makes the family's comment about it being a cheaper brand truly, well, extra rich, as one commenter perfectly put it.
Wow, so their dismissive judgment was based on, what, just a lack of knowledge? Or brand snobbery? What about famous musicians? Surely a cheapy brand wouldn't attract top talent.
You'd be absolutely right to question that. Guilds have been famously played by a remarkable array of artists. We're talking legends like George Benson, Brian May from Queen.
Brian May played a Guild.
He did, alongside his famous Red Special. Also, Eric Clapton, folk icon John Denver, Pete Townsend of The Who, Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Prine, Cherry Garcia.
Wow, okay.
Bonnie Raitt, Paul Simon, Muddy Waters, Mississippi, John Hurt, even country legend George Strait exclusively played a Guild D45 for years until he got a big endorsement deal to switch.
That list is seriously impressive. It completely debunks the in-laws' claims. It's not some unknown low-end brand at all.
Not even close. It clearly establishes Guild as a respected, high-quality brand.
Okay, so what about the brothers Les Paul? Is that really the gold standard he maybe thinks it is?
Well, look, Les Pauls are indeed very nice guitars, and they range widely in price too. But many commenters in the thread pointed out their sometimes variable quality, significant weight, and sometimes questionable price-to-performance ratio.
Interesting.
So the brother's choice to kind of, tout his Les Paul might be more about prestige or brand recognition than actual objective quality or playability, especially since he clearly doesn't seem to know much about other reputable brands like Guild.
So the general consensus, it sounds like, is that the in-laws were basically talking out of turn, judging a gift by its perceived price tag or brand recognition rather than its true quality.
Pretty much. It sounds like what people say when they want to sound more knowledgeable than they actually are.
Yeah, that rings true.
Precisely. And this incident just highlights how easily people can fall into that trap of judging gifts based on status rather than genuine merit or the thought behind it.
And this isn't just about a guitar anymore, is it? I mean, this whole situation quickly escalates beyond a Christmas gift.
Absolutely.
The wife's initial devastation was focused on the family's reaction, but she later had this sort of aha moment, realizing, I was expecting him to be so excited, and then it just didn't really happen like that in the end. It seems his never heard of this brand comment, while maybe initially just an honest unfamiliarity, became a solidified negative perception for him, kind of influenced by his family's subsequent digs.
That's a crucial insight, I think. It shows how external validation, especially from family, can heavily influence someone's perception, even subconsciously. And it also brings the class differences into sharper focus. The husband, despite roughing it in early adulthood, always had that financial safety net, his family to fall back on.
Right.
That provides a very different underlying security than the wife's genuine fear of homelessness you mentioned. They're coming from fundamentally different places of security.
That's a really profound point. Their collision of worlds, as the wife describes it, is usually positive. She says he reminds her she deserves new things, and she reminds him he doesn't need new jeans every single week.
Right. They balance each other.
But Christmas, especially with his family, is the exception.
And this exception likely stems from his parents' approach to gift giving. I mean, $2,000 plus per kid. That's not typical even for their stated income back in the 90s.
No, it seems excessive.
It really does. It suggests it might be less about pure wealth and more about keeping up with the Joneses, or, as some commenters suggested, cultivating a sense of entitlement in their children. It becomes less about the spirit of giving and maybe more about the performance of gift giving.
Right.
Where Christmas is almost like a competitive sport.
And that would certainly explain why gifts have to be opened in front of everyone rather than privately. It's for the audience, not just a shared family moment.
Exactly. It's performative.
But this also raises a really important question about the husband's character, doesn't it? Because the wife confirms he definitely does stand up for her in other ways, like with parenting choices, getting items secondhand, or letting her get dirty, as she puts it. She says this incident was not typical behavior for him, which made it sting even more.
Precisely. So the big question is, why did he not stand up for her this time?
Yeah.
Commenters hypothesized it might be a kind of built-in filter coping mechanism from just years and years of his family's entrenched behavior.
Yeah.
He might be so used to their materialistic comments that he simply tunes them out, or maybe doesn't register them as hurtful or problematic anymore.
That's plausible, a sort of ingrained defense mechanism.
It could be. And that's a significant and complex dynamic to navigate within a marriage, for sure.
So after all this less than joyous Christmas, what happened the morning after? Was there any resolution?
There was an update, thankfully. The wife calmly spoke with her husband the next morning, expressing how hurt she felt.
Good for her.
Yeah. And apparently, he was genuinely shocked by her feelings. He admitted he didn't think twice about what his family said, which again kind of supports that built-in filter theory, maybe.
Right.
He apologized for their reactions and for his own initial comment, explaining that the brand thing was just genuine unfamiliarity. He claimed he loved the guitar and was simply caught up in the craziness of Christmas, which is why he hadn't played it yet.
Okay, so a glimmer of hope there. How did she take that?
She said his response eased my mind a lot, which is good. But she was still understandably disappointed after a month's work of excitement building was slashed pretty quickly.
Of course, that initial moment can't really be undone.
Exactly. But knowing he actually likes it, she says, makes their opinion mean a lot less. So that's definite progress.
Yeah, that's huge. Knowing the recipient actually appreciates it cuts through a lot of the external noise.
It certainly is. And it really highlights the power of direct communication, doesn't it?
All right.
To clarify misunderstandings. However, it also underscores how deeply rooted these different perspectives are. The external validation, or lack thereof, from his family still had an immediate impact on his perception, and her long-term excitement was undeniably deflated.
This deep dive truly highlights how these ingrained beliefs about money, class, status, how they can subtly yet powerfully poison moments meant to be joyous.
Absolutely.
It vividly shows the emotional toll of unacknowledged effort and just differing expectations in gift giving. And like you said, the crucial role communication plays in navigating these complex family dynamics.
Absolutely. And many commenters, recognizing the problematic nature of this public gift opening ritual in his family, suggested that the couple should maybe start a new tradition.
Like what?
Like opening their personal gifts to each other privately, before the family arrives, or maybe even on Christmas Eve.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, it could be a really powerful way to shield those intimate moments from external judgment and just reclaim the genuine appreciation of giving and receiving between them.
That's a great idea to protect their shared moments. So, okay, what does this all mean for you, our listener? This story really makes us think about how our own experiences, our backgrounds, shape our expectations around receiving and giving gifts. Do we expect a certain reaction? Do we maybe subconsciously judge gifts based on brand or price, or on the thought and effort behind them?
Ultimately, this deep dive kind of forces us to confront. Are we truly celebrating the thought that counts? Or are we perhaps unconsciously engaging in competitive or even materialistic displays, especially around the holidays?
Yeah. Perhaps it's time to redefine what a truly big gift means. Is it about the biggest price tag, or is it about the most thoughtful, well-researched, and personally meaningful gesture? What would it mean to reclaim the pure joy of giving and receiving, free from those external pressures? That's definitely a thought to mull on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope it gave you plenty to consider.